In the summer of 1867, in a sparsely populated farming district south of Sedalia, Missouri, an 8-year-old named Timothy Caldwell became the center of what would come to be regarded as one of the most unsettling medical chronicles of the region. Dr. Samuel Harding, the county's lone physician, recorded months of observations in 3 battered journals about a child whose conduct confounded the medical understanding of the day. Outwardly, Timothy appeared unremarkable, polite, attentive, and agreeable. But underneath that affable mask lay behavior that 19th century science could not explain. Over the course of 6 months, 3 townspeople suffered fatal accidents, dozens of farm animals were found dead under inexplicable conditions, and 11 individuals who had encountered the boy met grim fates. Local officials sealed the records from more than a century, but the full account of Timothy Caldwell reveals a darkness that forces us to reconsider what childhood might conceal. The story begins not with violence, but with bereavement. Missouri in 1867 still bore the scars of the Civil War. Rural communities struggled to rebuild. Fathers gone, farms burdened with debt, families left to manage on their own. The Caldwell homestead, about 15 miles south of town, had been prosperous once. James and Martha Caldwell had raised livestock and grain until grief and war dismantled their plans. James died at Wilson's Creek in 1861. Martha succumbed to consumption in the winter of 1865. Their son Thomas, barely into adulthood, inherited land he could neither fully work nor pay for. When Thomas learned his brother William had died in Andersonville, leaving a widow and an 8-year-old, he brought the boy, Timothy, into his home in the spring of 1866. Timothy arrived carrying nothing but a tattered cloth bundle and an expression that made him seem older than his years. He was small, fair-skinned, with cropped hair kept short by his Aunt Sarah to discourage lice. He spoke little about his past. Fragments were all he offered. His father had been a soldier. His mother had wasted away. He'd stayed with neighbors for a spell after she died. What most adults noticed, however, was his impeccable manners. He said yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. He did his chores without fuss. He accepted discipline without complaint. To most, he was the ideal child. Dr. Samuel Harding first noticed Timothy during a June 1866 trip to town. Harding, trained at Missouri Medical College and seasoned by wartime practice, had developed an uncanny ability to read people. Timothy's comportment unsettled him. The boy answered questions calmly, met Harding's gaze appropriately, and showed none of the nervousness typical of a youngster in a strange place. Yet Harding felt watched, as if the child were appraising him in the same detached manner the doctor reserved for examining a patient. Timothy's stare carried an intensity that never fully eased.
The Caldwell farm was remote, but not hidden. Neighbors saw Timothy working the fields with machine-like focus, never pausing to play or dawdle. Ellen Patterson, who lived next door, remarked that her chickens became skittish whenever the boy came near their fence. They clustered and refused to come close. Her husband dismissed such notions as superstition, but she could not shake the unease. The first fatality arrived on a hot August afternoon in 1866. 5-year-old Mary Fletcher, the blacksmith's daughter, wandered near Willow Creek and did not return. Timothy came to the Fletcher house, soaked and pale. "Mrs. Fletcher," he told her, composed but grave, "I found Mary by the creek. She's not breathing." The search revealed the child face down in only 18 inches of water, a drowning, the doctor pronounced. Timothy supplied an unnaturally precise account of where the body lay, the way the dress snagged on a submerged branch, even the hue of the creek water where the child's face had rested. When asked why he was there, Timothy said he had been searching for a lost calf, a claim Thomas later corroborated. The calf turned up days later, miles away, grazing contentedly. At Mary's funeral, the boy sat with his aunt and uncle, head bowed. To onlookers, he seemed respectful. But Elenina observed that while others wept, Timothy's eyes never filled. His face showed no moisture when he thought no one watched. It was a small detail, but it lodged in people's minds. 3 weeks later, Henrik Larsson, an elderly logger who checked wild hives at a spot known as Devil's Bluff, was found dead beneath the rocks. Again, Timothy had been nearby, and again he claimed to have discovered the body. The scene suggested a fall. Larsson's neck was broken, yet someone noticed a peculiar cluster of dead bees at the base where he lay, more than would normally be found, and oddly concentrated. The hives at the bluff's summit appeared undisturbed. Timothy suggested the bees may have swarmed and disoriented the man, but the bee evidence did not match his story. The Caldwell farm was remote, but not hidden. Neighbors saw Timothy working the fields with machine-like focus, never pausing to play or dawdle. Ellen Patterson, who lived next door, remarked that her chickens became skittish whenever the boy came near their fence. They clustered and refused to come close. Her husband dismissed such notions as superstition, but she could not shake the unease. The first fatality arrived on a hot August afternoon in 1866. 5-year-old Mary Fletcher, the blacksmith's daughter, wandered near Willow Creek and did not return. Timothy came to the Fletcher house, soaked and pale. "Mrs. Fletcher," he told her, composed but grave, "I found Mary by the creek. She's not breathing." The search revealed the child face down in only 18 inches of water, a drowning, the doctor pronounced. Timothy supplied an unnaturally precise account of where the body lay, the way the dress snagged on a submerged branch, even the hue of the creek water where the child's face had rested. When asked why he was there, Timothy said he had been searching for a lost calf, a claim Thomas later corroborated. The calf turned up days later, miles away, grazing contentedly. At Mary's funeral, the boy sat with his aunt and uncle, head bowed. To onlookers, he seemed respectful. But Elenina observed that while others wept, Timothy's eyes never filled. His face showed no moisture when he thought no one watched. It was a small detail, but it lodged in people's minds. 3 weeks later, Henrik Larsson, an elderly logger who checked wild hives at a spot known as Devil's Bluff, was found dead beneath the rocks. Again, Timothy had been nearby, and again he claimed to have discovered the body. The scene suggested a fall. Larsson's neck was broken, yet someone noticed a peculiar cluster of dead bees at the base where he lay, more than would normally be found, and oddly concentrated. The hives at the bluff's summit appeared undisturbed. Timothy suggested the bees may have swarmed and disoriented the man, but the bee evidence did not match his story.
In September, 6-year-old Jacob Mills disappeared while playing in the woods. After 4 days of searching, volunteers found him in a hidden, overgrown well, alive when pulled out, but he died within hours. Timothy had been one of the searchers, guiding the party through rough terrain with an expertise that surprised even longtime locals. He described hearing cries and finding the concealed well. But when Dr. Harding observed the recovery and Jacob's final hours, he noticed the boy sitting apart, moving his lips as if murmuring, and watching Jacob clinically, cataloging the dying child's signs the way a scientist might note symptoms. When the child succumbed, Timothy's face registered no grief. Instead, Harding recorded what looked like something akin to satisfaction. Harding's unease hardened into suspicion. The well's rim showed deliberate arrangement, logs and branches placed to look accidental but fashioned to conceal. Harding began to suspect that Jacob had been placed there,
not simply fallen. Timothy's presence at multiple tragedies and his odd lack of normal emotional response no longer seemed coincidental. Over the ensuing months, Harding used his position as a physician to quietly investigate. Livestock across neighboring properties suffered bizarre fates. Chickens with cleanly broken necks and no predator tracks. Pigs with unexplained wounds. Calves found tangled in snares they could not have made themselves. In many of these instances, neighbors remembered seeing Timothy nearby. When Dr. Harding examined the poultry, he found injuries inflicted with anatomical knowledge, force applied to precise points. It was method, not chance.
As Thomas Caldwell recovered from a back injury that required extended bed rest, Harding's visits to the farm increased. He used those visits to ask Timothy more pointed questions. The boy's curiosity about death and injury was not childish. He spoke about mechanics and timing with a composure that made Harding uncomfortable. Timothy asked, bluntly, how long until someone is dead for sure, and queried whether people shrieked when grievously hurt. His vocabulary and the thoroughness of his notes suggested a child who had rehearsed these thoughts. Finally, Harding discovered the cave Timothy had mentioned. Inside were arranged animal bones, crude instruments fashioned from farm tools, and meticulous drawings, not childish doodles, but detailed sketches accompanied by observations. The notes cataloged how long various creatures remained conscious after different injuries and listed which methods induced the most distress. One notation beside a rabbit sketch read, in cold script, "Subject remained conscious for approximately 10 minutes after removal of eyes." Later drawings depicted human figures, some unmistakably resembling Mary Fletcher, Henrik Larsen, and Jacob Mills, annihilated with chilling anatomical commentary. Harding concluded what he had feared. The so-called accidents and animal deaths were not random. They fit the pattern of someone experimenting and escalating. Timothy had been studying responses to pain and death, first with animals, and, it seemed, then with humans. But without proof that tied the boy directly to the crimes, Harding could not act. What followed next was the dangerous, fraught work of gathering evidence in a community that still preferred explanations other than a child's culpability. Harding began documenting everything he could: the positions of clothing, the placement of camouflaging branches, the precise anatomical injuries, and he kept a separate ledger of eyewitnesses who placed Timothy near scenes. He also confided in a small circle of trustworthy neighbors, men who had served in the war and understood the difference between coincidence and design.
Confrontation was inevitable. One chilly morning, Harding and two neighbors approached the Caldwell farm with a warrant from the magistrate, supported by Harding's testimony and the mounting stack of suspicious facts. They found the cave and the papers inside it. They found tools stained in ways that suggested use beyond farm work. When Timothy was questioned, his answers were unnervingly calm. He explained that he had been curious, that he wanted to know how bodies worked so he could help if someone was hurt. But his notebooks, the methodical charts and drawings, spoke more loudly than his words. The town's reactions split along lines of fear and disbelief. Some demanded the harshest punishment. Others clung to the image of a traumatized orphan who'd been hardened by war and loss. The magistrate, forced by public pressure and Harding's mounting dossier, ordered that Timothy be removed from the Caldwell home and remanded into the custody of state authorities for further evaluation. Records after that point grow fragmentary. Harding's journals note an evaluation at an institution in St. Louis where surgeons and doctors debated whether Timothy's behavior sprang from an identifiable pathology, extreme neglect, or something else. Newspapers of the time, sparse and sensational, offered competing narratives: confinement, a quiet deportation to a distant asylum, or an escape. Local oral histories told versions where Timothy either vanished into anonymity or lingered in state care, his later life a blank on the county's ledger. Whatever the official resolution, the Caldwell case changed Sedalia. Families kept children closer, farms altered routines, and a wary eye was cast at the limits of what a child might be capable of. Dr. Harding continued to write. His journals, later unearthed, contain no sense of triumph. They record only a physician's grim duty to observe, to protect, and to record what the world often refuses to admit. Every note Timothy kept was exact, as though he were documenting the results of an experiment. But for Dr. Harding, this was only the beginning of Sedalia County's nightmare. The more he pieced together, the clearer it became. These weren't accidents of nature, nor the careless mistakes of a child. They were deliberate, staged with purpose, and recorded with unsettling precision. Harding realized he was staring into the mind of someone who viewed life and death not as sacred, but as material to be studied. For months, the doctor wrestled with how to expose the truth. How could a community accept that an 8-year-old boy might be behind so much suffering? Neighbors clung to disbelief, whispering excuses that the tragedies were misfortune, not malice. Yet the cave of drawings and tools told a story no one wanted to believe. When Harding finally brought his evidence forward, the county was shaken. Timothy's calm explanations, his insistence that he only sought to understand, were more terrifying than a denial. He showed no tears, no remorse, no fear. Just curiosity. The town fractured. Some demanded he be punished. Others argued he was only a child, a victim of war and grief who had lost too much, too soon. Officials chose the middle path. Timothy was taken from the Caldwell home and placed under state custody. What became of him afterward is uncertain. Records trail off in fragments: a report from an asylum in St. Louis, a rumor of transfer, whispers that he vanished altogether. In the absence of clarity, the legend only grew darker. To this day, old families in Sedalia County retell the Caldwell case as a warning that evil doesn't always arrive with rage, but sometimes with a quiet smile and polite manners. And perhaps most unsettling of all, that the darkest curiosities can hide in the smallest of figures. If this account left you unsettled, share it with someone who craves hidden history and shadowed mysteries. Hit the like button to help us continue unearthing these forgotten stories, and subscribe so you don't miss the next descent into the darker side of the past.